Restricciones regulatorias al uso de marcas. ¿Cumplen su objetivo? ¿Quién compensa a sus titulares por la pérdida de valor? Myrtha Hurtado, General Counsel Brand and Marketing Properties, Licensing and Anti-Counterfeiting en Nestlé, Suiza.
Maricruz, Villanea, Manager Partner of Ideas, Trademarks and Patents, Costa Rica. Kudo, Director Partner of Kudo and Niño de Rivera, Abogados, Mexico. Chairperson Jacqueline Moreau, founding a partner of Moreau, González and Associados, Venezuela. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the executive board for the opportunity to chair this panel, all of you here present. Today, we will talk in the coming minutes about a subject that is currently becoming very important, especially in our Latin American region, because recently different legislations and laws are being incorporated, and they are coming to impose the compulsoriness to include signage in the labeling of certain food. When we talk about signage, maybe most of you already know these black octagons that we start to see in the packages of some products, and this food which is related with big amounts of sodium, sugar, that can affect the health of consumers. Likewise, we are preventing the use of characters or cartoon characters in the packaging, and even worse, the advertising in the packaging of this food. What is the intention of these regulatory entities? They are saying about attacking or controlling what commonly has been called the non-contagious diseases. And these diseases could be obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure, because they represent a social and economic problem in the worldwide economies. In the coming minutes, this panel, this wonderful panel that is with me today, will talk about what has been that impact of these restrictions from the viewpoint of consumers, the companies, what is the accounting and financial vision of this type of restrictions and how they impact. Definitely, they are generating some confusion in the consumer in the moment of buying the product. What is happening in Mexico with this type of restrictions? I welcome Villanea, Villanea, who will offer an introduction and will tell us about the background of these regulations. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming after lunch and especially a difficult time. And I will tell you about the growing wave in Latin America and the correct sanitary perception about the brands as guilty of all these diseases. The origin of what is called the plain packing or the package without ads starts in 1986 and 76, and it starts with an idea of austerity. And the first time when we start listening the different concept is more concept of more simple products, and for the time in France takes place a trend to sell and to buy these products. This is until 1990 when the World Health Organization started talking about all these NCDs, which are non-communicable diseases. That is to say, those diseases that cannot be conveyed from one person to the next. And from the risk factors of these diseases that, as Jackie said, like diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, and all of these diseases come or take place because of risk factors like the consumption of tobacco, alcohol, diets, sedentarism, and in general, the styles of life that we have. The governments, when they attempt to start regulating and trying to decrease the burden of all these diseases for the health systems, they start to do, in my view, a wrong perception between health and brands. The main basis of this is that health is related with the brands. In 1990, when all the issue starts with about tobacco, the World Health Organization in a meeting in Australia said, give relevance to the packaging for the selling and consumption of tobacco. Well, all of us here know that it is not because of the package why people buy tobacco. It is addictive, it makes people feel good. There's people who consume it because they want to stop eating, and many other reasons for which they consume tobacco that has nothing to do with the brands. The sort of diseases derive from different factors, and I said before, especially because of the habits of people, the way they eat, the lack of exercising, and a big bunch of other things. Health, it is clear that it is an essential subject, but we need to differentiate it from the brands. Health and brands, I don't know when they became related, and even more and more, there has been the saying that the brands are guilty for the problems of health. And it all starts with tobacco. The tobacco industry has been leading these restrictions for many years, and here we can see how they began with small alert ads in the packaging, and more the brand was disappearing until we have an example of what was the aspect of the cigarette package some 25 years ago and how it looks today, without brand practically, with no logos, with no distinction. And what has been the largest consequence of this? Well, forging and hidden trading, and by that there is no longer regulation in the products as sold in the streets. So all these products are not meeting with the toxicology or the necessary ingredients. So on the one hand, they're trying to solve a subject, but at the end they are becoming worse because those cigarettes are no longer being regulated, and they are even worse than they used to be in the past. These are regulations that start with tobacco have been progressing and progressing, especially in Latin America. In the industry of beverages and sugar content food in countries like Mexico, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, and the Dominican Republic, for instance, and they are in discussion, many more countries. They are introducing more and more measures in this regard. In several of the countries, as we can see here, the packages have more and more stamps, and they are removing more room to the distinction and the brand, to the designs, and adding all the signs of high sugar content, high fats content, high sodium content. Every day the stamp is larger and the distinction of the product is smaller. In Chile and Mexico, they also forbidden the use of cartoon characters to advertise products with high content of sugar. This is how we see Melvin the elephant. This is now the way it looks like in Mexico, this package, and it was eliminated from the package. Another example that has been quite controversial, because especially in Chile there were many issues. The Kinder Sorpresa, that to me it was the childhood of my daughters who wanted to buy the Kinder Sorpresa and asking always me to buy them. It has been satanized, and in many countries the consumption of this toy and chocolate. This is the way it looks like in the rest of the countries. Pingüinos as well. There's no longer penguins, the penguin characters, and now penguins have no more penguins anymore. I think it is important that authorities understand that the main issue of non-transmissible diseases are not the brands, but the cost and the education given to population. Creating what should be foster is create and promote options of nutritional food and beverages that comply with what the population needs, and preventing the people to consume excessive of things, but the approach made that has not been the proper one, because what they want is to not to promote children, but it is parents who actually buy the product. So on the one hand, they say, okay, I want to remove the cartoon so that children are not attracted by the excess of sugar, but they are full of stamps that children do not understand. So there's always a confusion between the buyer and the consumer. The increase of costs of healthy food is the main concern when that exists, but not the brands or the way the food with sugar, fat is sold, or beverages. In fact, it has benefited industries that have been satanized because they are harmful. Because even when we were very young, we used to be told that, well, now everything is bad. What was very, very bad is now in the common package of everything that is bad. And everything generates diseases. In my view, and those who know me, you know that I am very stubborn about health and those issues. In my view, there must be options, and everything could be edible with a means of communication and knowing what we eat and what we don't. The baby formulas as well in countries like the Dominican Republic is being highly regulated. The regulations about the preparations for babies. These products need to comply with many regulations in the Dominican Republic. For instance, they are not allowed to make comparisons with mother's milk and announcing that they have certain qualities, less fat or more protein. That things are being prohibited, and they have also prohibited the use of cartoons in the packaging, which is nonsense, because a baby from 0 to 2 years of age will not go to the supermarket to buy the formula. There are many criteria about this. My older child was allergic, and she drank formula, and she made it very well. So it is not, I don't precisely agree on this, and even less when thinking that it is the use of the bear or the brand telling or harming or making a child to grow with or without health. In countries like Kenya, it is even forbidden the use of pacifiers. I am wondering what happens with the people who are breastfeeding. They are removing the capacity to say, I want this formula of getting informed and getting the information of what I am buying with the best option in the market. And it works. Does it work? Well, that is the big question that most people ask themselves. INTA, the Committee of Brand Restriction of INTA in 2021 made a study with GMZs and millennials, Generation Z and millennials, to hear their opinion about what is happening here. And these were kind of the main things that came up from this survey. The brands enable the decision of purchase. The brands represent quality and trust needed by the consumer. 7 out of 10 consumers trust in the brand, while 4 out of 10 trust in governments, and even in ours. Studies have proven that the use of security seals, when the security seals start all this in high content of sodium or sugar or fat, etc., when they start it's being proven that the first year there was kind of amazement of people, they got concerned, but as time goes by, and when everything is now prohibited or is no longer healthy, they reach the point that more than 60% of products in the supermarket have stamps on them. So at the end, people is now used to see the stamp, and now it is no longer paid attention to. In 2021, ASIPI conducted a study as well in a supposition paper asking the governments to rule with observation of the proportionality and rationality matters in terms of healthy matters, not only thinking about the sanitary measures, but in the right of companies and the rights of intellectual property that they were removing from them. As a conclusion, the regulations of brand restrictions have increased in the last decade, leaving a negative impact in the industries and consumers. There are no scientific studies that say yes, indeed, the restrictions on the use of brands have decreased the problems with the diseases. There is no study nor study that can prove that this is no longer being consumed. Just the other way around. All the producers of this type of initiatives are putting more and more their low projects that want to prohibit the use of brands in these things of Nintendo, the video games. So they want to cover more sectors because this is not working. There is not a dialogue because that is another big issue. There is no dialogue between the authorities and consumers to reach an intermediate position to give the companies with the possibility to look for an in-between. Clearly, there is a violation of the rights of intellectual property and a loss of these valuable brands in countries like Mexico, where the use of brand is compulsory. What will happen with Tony the Tiger and Melvy and the Bimbo Bear and all in this 15 or 20 years when they are gone forever? As I said before, there is this contradiction between the authority getting confusing the buyer and the consumer, because the mothers and parents are going to the supermarket, not the children. That purchase decision would be more assertive if they educated the families to buy properly. I was reading some time ago an article that I found amazing that talks about the fact that in Mexico, it is said that Coca-Cola or Pepsi is the milk of poor people. Why is that? Because the liter of Coca-Cola or Pepsi is costs even less than a liter of milk. So the solution should be, let us lower the taxes, let us sponsor milk so more people has it available, and let us not punish the brand. So let us help in that regard. So, and the measures like the blank packages and the restrictions to brand do not protect the consumer, just the other way around. They are affecting their decision-making capacity and to decide in the supermarket what they are buying and what company from they are getting it. So this is my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maricruz. Well, next, Myrtha Hurtado. With her presentation, I will leave 2 questions to Myrtha for the development of her presentation. Start posing the questions to Maricruz, because at the end we will have a Q&A session for that. Myrtha, please tell us your experience about the implementation of these measures that Maricruz was telling us about, how they are being implemented and effectively if there is that risk of confusion with this change of packaging in the products nowadays, and how the companies start to reinvent themselves at the end. We see that especially in Mexico, at least in my country, these regulations do not exist. So I am amazed by seeing the packages with or without the cartoon characters, and how there are companies that need to eliminate the brand and add signage, and the same product they start to add the brand internally. We were talking about the fact that the slices of bimbo bread is including the image, the character in the bread itself. Welcome, Myrtha. Well, thank you. Before I start, I would like to advert the audience that the Spanish is not my language, and sometimes I get confused. Please be patient with me, bear with me. I will try to do it as best as possible, as always, when I am invited to share my knowledge with you. As Jackie has said, I would like to share with you a couple of restrictions that happen in the restriction of brands environment, in particular in Latin America. And I will tell you about the specific case of Mexico, because our company has also been involved in litigation. We have processed before the Supreme Court of Justice. And to start, I don't want to repeat what was being told in the introduction, or what Maricruz has said. That is absolutely clear, but I find it important to remind the context again. We actually have a conflict between the health policy and the interest of the brand holders. That is clear, and Maricruz has explained that very well. Now, we have, since many decades ago, we have a part and in the regulation of health. And I say regulations because mostly in many countries they don't take place at the level of law, but they go through the health or sanitary ministry, and many times they are not aware of, because they start with little changes. That is what happened in the packages of drugs, where everything was made on the basis of the health authority, and the holders of brands recently noticed after a long period of time that they were starting to restrict the use of certain brands, because what is intended to do is to comply with all the regulations. So when it is not a law but a regulation, it is even more difficult to detect them. But in general, yes, it is true that governments are trying to implement legislations, bylaws to promote healthier election for consumers. Now we have seen that they are restricting the rights of the brand owners in the packages, especially in Mexico and Chile, not only the use of cartoon characters, but advertising as well. And I think that is one of the reasons that we see that has more impact, because even if it is true that the decision in the supermarket is not made by children, the advertising is addressed to them, and that is very clear. There is no doubt that this is a tool of marketing, that it's a reason of existence. And now companies like Nestlé have a global commitment precisely not to address advertising for some products that could be high in fat or high content of calories in general for certain ages, but certainly restrict mainly that exposure in that period of childhood. And also to bring the positions together between what we want to attain at the level of health and what we think that could be a healthy diet that would allow to eat a product that might be an indulgence product. And then, obviously, these regulations always try to protect the consumer, to say that they make informed decisions in the moment of selecting products. And we will see in the case of what was implemented in Chile and Mexico that created more confusion than anything else, not only among consumers, but also among the health professionals as well. Here I don't have to explain why the brands have a legitimate right or explain the restrictions, how it should be, but I think that it is clear that all the measures taken have a direct impact. Now, I think that it is clear that there continues to be a challenge on how to reach a better health, especially when we see, for instance, that in Chile, a couple of years ago, 34% of children were obese, That is an alarming news, and we all have the interest that the future is different for everybody. So I think that we need to continue looking for measurements, but in a way that we keep the rights of the brand owners, and especially the protection of competition in the market, which is another very important element.
Lo que es el contexto de este
And to conclude with the context of this conflict and the solutions need to be also harmonized. Given that there are many fields, we see that given that we do not have at the regional level, not even a harmonization, and we as consumers, we are facing regulations and legislation which is totally different. So depending on the country, the stamp given to a country could be different, even if we are talking about the same product, and that leads us to a different sort of confusion. For instance, here in Mexico, I spent some days with the Mexican business of Nestlé here, and I noticed when doing the market visit, there is a lot of imported products. Imported products have a different composition when compared to local products, but now they compulsorily need to bear the stamps. But we reach different stamps depending on the background. So it is not clear how we compare and what are the stamps that we see and what are those about which we should have information and how to understand them. And then I will elaborate more on this. Now, I also wanted to give you another idea.
Because it's not only about criticizing what it's already enforced or being implemented, but to have a broader view and also to offer solutions. And well, regarding governments trying to protect citizens, not only foods and beverages, but generally speaking, for many years, a development, driven by the United States is the nudged policy, trying to unconsciously drive us or make us decide the product, the service, and the way of living that is healthier or less risky. So these are measures that are not necessary guidelines or standards, but it's what in the States, the children areas for food, the healthier products are more accessible and available for children and have a better perception than less healthy products that still exist. And what was achieved in one decade, it's even though they have products one next to the other, the way they are shown, are displayed in these dining rooms, children are eating a banana or an apple instead of other stuff. What I want you then to bear in mind is that there's a system of many governments that you might consider good or bad one, but it's our own decision on how we want to be fitted and what we want to have for our life. But this is an impulse, a selection of foods by choosing one or the other depending on how they display the elements. Facilitate and promote healthy action. It's an election, but yes, some products are positioned in some way that people can feel more impulsed to make an informed and healthier decision. And Maricruz already mentioned one of the key elements of this has to be the education. If we don't educate people, we're lost. We do know that whenever we want to buy something nice, it's gone or something. It would, of course, they will have sugar and fats, and salt, and this can happen. Well, once in a time, but not in your daily diet. The impulse policy, it's given between private and public contribution and collaboration, where we have some dialogues so as to find solutions that are much more less impacting in our IP rights, and they also have a positive impact on health, either in infants or generally speaking. So how everything is related? Well, the fact is that on the one hand, we have the dilemma between restrictions and promotions, and we have to see how we can to avoid what we are living in Chile and in Mexico, precisely to act complementary, not only to think about the strongest tool, and we don't even know if it's going to pay the fruits of, but just to think about the possibility of having a more balanced situation between what we want to achieve as governments regarding the health and also for the companies. Our companies have a very strong committee on sustainability and also considers ingredients of products and others. So we have to work together to find future solutions. Evidently, we are concerned with what's going on in Latin America. Once more, I want to highlight this. There has been a very significant confusion because first of before implementing the guidelines, people were not informed at all. From one day to another, people are facing some stamps and the packagings, and they have no idea. They're clueless on how to read them or what they mean. I will show you cases. Products that you thought they were healthy products and that you used to eat because you thought you were eating healthy, they become products that have 2, 3 stamps, and the other way around. So this is creating confusion in consumers, and it becomes really difficult to make decisions for them. Maricruz already mentioned it, and I was impacted or shocked when I visited supermarkets and mom and pop shops in Mexico. It's that when you enter, you have to look for the products that have no stamps. One of the motifs, it's if everything it has a stamp, nothing has a stamp. I mean, it's useless because you don't even take your time to verify what type of stamp and the meaning the product has. So the perception of changing of the products, it's important, and of course it is a huge challenge for all the people handling brands to know the flexibility of adapting of the different needs. And it's not a matter of not being transparent or to hide things. It's true that in certain countries, regulations took companies such as ours to reformulate our products. So, what are the pro healthy activists saying, of people from the NOGs that are driving these changes? UCC products are being reformulated, so this law has sense, makes sense. You could say yes. Yes, there have been many companies that are reformulating products, lowering the fat content, etc. But that is true up to a certain point, because we also have to see the historical evolution of food products. Reformulations have taken place and validation during the last decades. It's not only because a law is setting companies such as Nestlé and others to reformulate products to be healthier. We also have examples that during decades, products were changing little by little, and nowadays they're healthier, between quotes, because that depends on how much you eat of these contents, but also without the restriction of the use of brands, this has been shown. It's a matter of establishing a dialogue between industry, NOGs, or activists, and governments and consumers to know the mindset of consumers and how they make their decisions. For the Mexican Association, I wanted to show you the reactions of consumers. On the one hand, we had a lot of social noise regarding what it is or it's not the meaning of a seal because they were not understanding, and at the end, zero interest they were not willing to read or checking the information at the end of the day. Another thing is the politicization of this topic on the hands of the government, and also a lot of misunderstandings of this regulation itself. On behalf of consumers, there's still a huge lack of knowledge of this standard of a 501, and we are seeing polarities. Here there are some examples of confusions. We already saw the elephant with Choco Crisps products, but you can see that cranberries. I'm a fan from cereals that I eat at home at morning, and cranberry can be as bad as a Choco Crispy. For many people, it's very difficult to understand that and base their decisions, such as this one. You can also see the example to the right. It's an ice cream having a value of two stamps, and the mayonnaise is supposedly healthier, has 3 stamps. So how can I explain children or anyone that needs to make a purchase decision what's the product they have to eat for healthier purposes? I mentioned this at the beginning, and one of the things that was highly criticized was that the health professionals didn't understand what was happening. They were not involved or considered during the process of the standard 501. So there was a very little awareness, and nobody had spoken about this. Therefore, they had no necessary information when they needed to give. When they were at their practices. And also from the health professionals, when they read the content, they were disenchanted. They said, this is not helping on my task. This is not helping me to have health improvements. Other 3 things is when they try to implement them in the things that they want with the patients, there are a lot of concerns because of the criteria of selection. The main concern of what is the effect of these stamps. Sometimes they made bad decisions because they're not understanding, and also we do not know the adherence or how it will end up. It's clear for everyone that we have to find solutions that would balance the public health objectives and also the targets of the different brands. And I'm sure Luis will talk about this, but as of today, I, globally speaking, haven't seen any case that has asked for a compensation. It hasn't taken place at all. Even if we have discussed that the importance of the judicial and legal arena, it's my personal opinion is I believe that those who decide not to fight this battle believe that just because we are implementing and accepting, we all have the stamps and everything, they believe it will stop here. From my personal viewpoint, it's absolutely mistaken, this option. In Chile, we haven't had any impact on infant obesity. If we're not tackling the objective with that, they will continue pushing with more tools or more standards. Here in Mexico, there are some amparos still pending. It will take place in the decision. The position will be heard on January, and I think we have to continue talking about this topic and to see who is issuing the laws. These are standards that should have been taken at a law or an act level not as a regulations, and it's not clear the specificity, the compensation, and other stuff that needs to be considered. Maricruz also mentioned that external associations are running continuous evaluations, and I think we have to continue doing that to say that measures are not meeting the objectives. In Dominican Republic, laws for infant formula has been there for decades and haven't changed absolutely nothing. No decisions are made based on that. And openly speaking, in many, unfortunately, in many countries, as industries, we haven't been able to work to join forces. Industry is extremely diverse. We have small companies and large companies that are focused, for example, on sodas or others that have a wider arrangement of products. So I think that here we have our weakness. It's very difficult to establish a dialogue with the government if we won't do it together. We have to collaborate among everyone in the industry. Brands have a very important role for innovation, and everything that limits us sooner or later will have an impact, because we are now talking about advertisement restrictions, and in other countries we're talking about taxes to increase taxes to the less healthy products. Well, with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Myrtha. I was also confused about the ice cream. I thought ice cream was worse than mayonnaise. Okay, Luis, welcome. And I would like to, well, open an initial question for you, because Luis will talk about a very important thing, this countdown, this impact that these restrictions can affect. How can these restrictions affect the companies? And my question is that if these restrictions can have this financial impact in the different companies. Welcome. Thank you. A couple of statements before that. Thank you very much to the committee for this invitation. I would like to give the acknowledgments to Enrique, my friend, my dear friend. Oh, you're there. Sorry, I thought you weren't here. Congrats. Luis, best luck to whatever comes, and Marti Gracias, thank you for your support. Second is that since yesterday night I've been with fever. So if I start saying nonsense, maybe it are the drugs that I was that I'm taking. I do apologize for that. And I would like to talk about the Mexican case about brand restrictions, but not only from the IP approach, but also on how they impact financially, well, the taxes and in the accounting or the books. Advertisements and brands through creativity and convincing messages has become in a combo as a determined factor to create more income, and obviously that they can have impacts in the balances. Through competitiveness and innovation, companies started creating characters, brand characters that surpass the acknowledgments and positioning of this more than the product itself. Here we have clear examples. Who can deny the positioning of the biggest bread, the bimbo bear, or who doesn't relate the cereals with the toucan or the tiger? Unfortunately, in Mexico, because of modifications of the Health Act, the standard, some restrictions were established. Use of characters and use of characters with the brands. and also these black stamps that show the calorie content and salt content of all products here. If the and I think this can apply to any jurisdiction. If the Mexican state has the constitutional legal faculties to make these restrictions, and if there is a sanitary justifications for these such restrictions? And my answer is I don't think so, and I think that not many of you will share my point of view. But this is the good things of living in a democratic country. But from my personal perspective, I consider that there's no legal, constitutional, fundamental so that they can restrict brands. I will explain. First, I consider that there is a violation on the freedom of speech. They are restricting and limiting a message that I want to convey to my consumers. There's also a violation to the free trade and free industry because they are not allowing me to execute the trade that I consider it legal. There is the violation on the equity and equality guarantee because prohibition it's not generally the publicity or brands. Prohibition it relies on a specific market, and we're talking about a pre-packaged food and alcoholic beverages. So advertisements is not prohibited. Characters in other products are not prohibited, but the restriction only is focused specifically into pre-packaged or pre-bottled food and alcoholic beverages. So there is a violation on these equality and equity guarantees because we are suffering and living more restrictions than others. I also consider that there are violations to the acquired rights. All these brands that I showed you previously and that my dear colleague friends show us, all these brands were obtained and created from when it was allowed and when we could have those brands. We as industries were there, we registered and we exploited them. Now, with this restriction, they are eliminating this acquired right that I have at a legal way. There's another thing, the privilege or the limitation of rights. Also, companies have rights, owners of brands have rights. Of course, the population have it too, but here is where I have to appeal. Either one right is better than others, or in a balance and equity system, we all have the same rights. I think that we have enough elements to question the institutional foundations of a state in order for them to prohibit the use of the brands. Now let's go to the sanitary restrictions. Is there really a health reason for this prohibition? Because we need to speak freely. What this restriction looking for is to end up with fat people. Restriction, being fat, it's not a sin. Let's start with that. And now that I've become fatter and I'm healthier than ever, no, just speaking seriously, yes, we have to protect infants. We have to give them information and we have to share true information so that they can know what is convenient for them or not. But without neglecting or putting aside the social responsibility of the companies, is this really their role? To educate, or if with this system of eliminating characters, are we ending or finishing with the fat ones, or this is an utopic world? Of course, we want healthy children, and nobody here in the room will say that we're happy having obesity and infancy. But is this really the solution that we're asking or needing? Is this really the journey that we want to take? Because if it's true, it would seem that the only causes for children obesity is the consumption of these products. What I think it's false. So where do we leave all these motifs? They are not prepackaged, they are not alcoholic beverages. However, of course, they help children to have a very poor health. So, brand restrictions do not eliminate the damage that they are pretending to eliminate. And besides that, the product is it's still available. The character is the one that is restricted. So I believe that from the healthy side, there's no real purpose for this restriction. With the Standard 501 and modifications to the Health Act, we have the elimination of characters in advertisements, pre-bottled or packaged food, alcoholic beverages, and we cannot use these characters on packaging nor advertisements as we were told. And besides that, they imposed us the system of caloric content stamps, or these octagons, black stamps. Information educates, and I don't think we have to put in the same bowl these octagons that the advertisement restriction. I think that these octagons might be good. It's good to educate consumer on the content, because I've lived that in my children, nobody told them. And they said, no, Papa, Daddy, it has 1 or 2 or 3 octagons. So you can give elements to the children so they can have the ability to decide what is convenient for them or not. So on the other hand, I don't think that restricting a character in a packing would achieve the same purpose. So it's not necessarily a solution. I am Mexican, and we have the problem of drug trafficking. We all know that, and drug trafficking comes from prohibition. Nobody and no government has been able to face these as a health problem. And how many deaths have been caused by that. And a tip, when you talk about Mexican, it's not nice to talk about and to be proud about these King Pink cereals, and it's not an icebreaker to have a conversation. It's a crime, apology, and it is terrible. Our country is so big that if you have, I mean, you can talk about Slim and Chapo Guzman, and it's not nice to have a conversation about the King Pig series. And, well, continue with my talk. Yes, with this type of stamps, we are offering information so that consumers can make more informed decisions. So based on these prohibitions, the Mexican companies, what did they do? Well, divided into three. One, someone's are Revilios, and I won't mention any companies, but there were some of them that are asking for an habeas corpus and amparo. There were companies that are now on amparo. Today, there is no one single sentence that will declare the constitutionality of prohibition. What we have, it's sentences between quotes, adverse sentences, but for process and definitiveness. Our judges and the juries said it's not enough for the standard to come in force for you to ask an amparo because it's not causing you damage. And I'm not sharing this criteria, but this is what was resolved. The rationale made by the jury, they say you need an inspection and a sanction on behalf of our sanitary a body that is a covered place where they sanction to us for having these elements, and based on that act, we can ask for an amparo. Those are the sentences that have been given. There are other processes that are there, but the companies, we have two types of companies: the rebellious ones with the amparos, and the others that are abiding the law.
Those that decided by compliance, and there we can see on the screen Marinela products in Mexico. It was very famous, the Gansito Marinela. It was a jingle saying, "Remember me." It was very famous and position. Now the little goose is no longer there, and we also have these cases. I read once that creativity is intelligence having fun, and this was very creative by the largest baker in the world. They told Osito Bimbo, you cannot be in a package, you cannot be advertising bread. Okay, so I will advertise and I will appear in the packages of the national brand of napkins where they cover the sandwiches consumed. I hope that the forum allowed me the way to express Osito Bimbo in the social media on how to make this, or also in the products. Osito Bimbo was stamped in the product as such. It is not violating the regulation because it is not in the packaging and not advertising. So this creativity was highlighted by the industry of Bimbo. So now we have the context of prohibition and restriction. And this is where we have the hypothesis that we are holding. There is a damage to the owner of the brands in their patrimony. The brand, the character, that registry is an intangible asset that constitutes the patrimony of the holder and the obligation. One thing is what should be, and the other is reality. But what should be is registering that intangible asset as part of the accountability of the owner and to express it in a certain value. And that intangible asset originally is stated a value of creation that more or less is everything that you have invested, everything that you have to spend to get the brand, the publicist, the advertising agency, expenditure for registry. That is our initial value, a given value. That value N is registered in my initial accountability. Time goes by and the brand starts being successful. The brand, the character, starts having impact in the sales of the company. So the brand and character is capitalized and increases the value. Once again, what should be in my accountability, the N value is N plus 1, N plus 2, progressively until NK. When we consider as an exponential, the potential, the character is so positioned that becomes a more valuable intangible asset than any material asset that the company could have. It is said that if it was not by these beautiful brands, they would only be selling black water with sugar. But when you add a brand, you generate one of the two most desirable products in the planet. So our brand, our character, gets more value and needs to be registered in that accountability. So that one had value N, and that is now N plus 500,000. Of course, there is an increase of wealth, an increase in the patrimony of the owner. How to express those values? The fiscal system in the Mexican case has ways to do that. In Mexico, there are two professionals doing an assessment for tax purposes, a certified accountant, and other are the public brokers. There are different means authorized, and that value, again, continues to be re-expressed in the company's accountability. But comes prohibition, and when it comes, that asset that is worth N plus 500,000 K from overnight, because of a legislation or regulatory decision, it becomes useless. So that used to be very valuable, when becoming non-usable, is no longer worthy, because no matter how well positioned the brand is, if it cannot comply the purpose for which it was created, if Osito Bimbo can no longer sell bread, of course it loses value. If Gansito cannot be on the packaging of Marinela, there is no purpose of having it. So that value that the brand used to have, derived from the reform and the restriction, loses its value totally. And of course, there is an adverse effect in the impact, in the assets of the holder, because that brand with a certain value, if I gave a license for that, I could have an important royalty. Or if I sold the brand to a third party, that had a high value that I could have as a profit. Now the brand becomes zero. Then comes the thought. And what have states done to compensate that patrimonial and tax damage that we're having? The reality is nothing. no one of the jurisdictions in our region had the intention or creativity to give a compensation to the brand owners that have lost their value. And our proposal is clear, simple, easy, very questionable. And the first is an application similar to fiscal loss. I had my intangible asset that value was worth $1 million. Now I do not have it anymore. So fiscally acknowledge that as a loss. I had a fiscal loss that I can lower versus the income tax on the taxes I pay. No country has done it. But again comes the question, and what the brand owners that affected do not have the right to ask the legislators creative solutions of compensation because it has never been explored. And the second is a patrimonial claim from the state that I acknowledge the authority to Enrique. I will not elaborate a lot of that, where you ask the state to acknowledge that damage throughout a litigious entity. So to conclude my presentation, the actual damage exists, and there is no way, an ideal way to compensate. I actually think that I am representing a spend of money to the state is acknowledged as a fiscal loss to lower that value I lost from the brands, to lower it from my taxes. Thank you very much. Well, we have still some minutes. If you would like to ask any question to the members of the panel, Enrique. Please, the microphone. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Congratulations to the panel, and especially on the fiscal part with Luis. I agree with the theory of the fiscal loss. Technically speaking, in order to apply it, would you have the value, the value of that brand classified and defined before the legislation? Yes, compulsorily. First, to give it a value that you will deduct as a fiscal loss, you need to give that value. What is the way to quantify it? Well, what is stated in the books, in the accountability, with an assessment, with one of the methods of assessment. So answering your question, I would say yes. For it to happen, the brand owner has to have expressed in money terms the intangible that has lost its utility. What draws my attention is that I go to the Mexican practice, and most of the companies in the small and medium-sized companies hardly have these activities conducted. But I don't think, and there we need to play with the figure, and at the end, with the revenues, you need to prove the damage with application of this law. Technically, I agree 100% with you. The ideal and correct would be to have it and then you apply it. But you need to explore or play with a figure where we, through accounting records of 5 to 10 years, and to allocate a value, because today we still have customers that do not have it in the constitutive constitution of the company. So there it is complicated. Yes, I think that there could be a retroactive assessment, because at the end of the day you have the accounting historical data of how the intangible contributed in the sales. We could do that. The ideal thing would be to express that value. I agree that the small and medium-sized companies, it's difficult for them to have it, but if we have big brands that given that receive a license for that intangible, then you would have the assessment, so the large, really large companies will finally comply with that. Myrtha has a comment. Yes, I have a comment, because everything which is fiscal can always be wrong, because when we define a value, and if that value, because we want to ask the government to refund something, we need to have in mind that it is also a value to be used to review our fiscal accounts from the past years, and mostly it happens a lot, especially in multinational companies, where the brands are not of the local owner, but from a foreign owner, and you go into very complicated issues to agree between governments on what should be the taxation of that intangible. I like the idea for multinationals, which is precisely the owners of those big brands. We need to be very careful in the moment of deciding to go that way and to say what the value is, because if that value was not the one that it always had or always given in a certain country, I think that we could also go into more complex problems, and certainly can be solved. But I think that we need to be very careful in the moment of starting to have a strategy intended to that aim. Thank you. Any question? Thank you. I have a question for, this is a conceptual question. How can we say that the labeling you show is a restriction in the use of the brand? Because I understand that the personnel, well, removing the character, that in the strict sense is a restriction to the use of a brand or a piece of work. But the labeling you show in the case of plain packaging in tobacco, that the black package is also a restriction to the use of brand. What is the argument to say that the labeling itself is restricting the use of a brand? And secondly, it is said that there are cases of Nestlé in the Supreme Court of Justice currently in Mexico. What are the arguments of these things that are being actually applied? I can answer to the part of that. It is considered that the sanitary octagons that read excessive sugar are a restriction to the use of the brand, because all the designs of the packaging are many times brands. And they restrict the design more and more to include the safety stamps. So the first thing you see in the packaging is not the brand and distinction of the product, but these safety elements. Well, here on top of what she said, it is not only the stamp, but depending on the product and its size, many times you don't have the room for the brand because of the dimensions. The only thing is, of course, it is not as drastic as in a package of cigarettes, but if you have no room for nothing, then there would be for the different versions of the brands. Myrtha, about the second question, if I remember correctly, you were asking about amparo pending in the Supreme Court of Justice in Mexico. I would like to clarify that Nestlé, the amparo procedure exclusively to the intellectual property element. We are not going into the rest of the discussion that I know the 3 amparos that are still pending are broader, and about Nestlé, we are only covering the intellectual property. And there, the arguments and have been mentioned before. Actually, the law took place the way it should have taken place, and the Congress and the Congress delegates in the proportionality, compensation, and well, the fact that it is restricting the use of the brand. So straight to the point, it's only IP. Thank you. Oh, well, a last question, yes, because of time constraints. Good afternoon. I want to add a comment, and perhaps the presenters can issue an opinion, because in this case, it is not only about what you're talking about, and it brings me to memory that other countries, in this case, most recently in the field of spirituous beverages in Ireland, for instance, they presented before the World Trade Organization a law draft to be implemented precisely with this labeling, that it is not that they restrict the use of the brand, but it affects the function of the brand. the brands indicating the consumer, the quality, and a series of elements. However, when you put the brand and you have signs telling that it causes immediate cancer when you consume the product, then the situation is very difficult. When the subject of the intellectual property was taken to the World Trade Organization, the basic explanation was to strengthen the intellectual property and therefore eliminating the non-tariff barriers to trade. However, now with this presentation and these standards, there's no doubt that it is affecting the use of intellectual property. In this case in particular, we have denounced, in my country in particular, through the way of the World Trade Organization and the Ministry of Foreign Trade, etc., made their comments, their observations to the proposal of the law. But the law was released immediately. Undoubtedly, it restricts the territory. We are some of the owners in that territory. We are not national. We are foreign holders, and where we are exporting products. And well, it is a territory that practically will be very affected, so the products may not reach there because, as it was commented here, the level of products needs to be modified and made it substantially. Other countries have made some similar standards, but they have admitted other signs that were included in the products about, for instance, the effects on pregnant women, etc. So there is a situation of the world organizations and the World Health Organization and these other standards that at the end don't actually show with figures and results, as the presenter said, when they said that there were no results showing that it lowers obesity in children, etc. So mainly we are in favor of health, but well, where are those data saying that the ingestion of alcoholic beverages would commonly causes immediately cancer, mortal cancer? So what I wanted to highlight is precisely that. It is not only what you have presented, but there are several countries that are in this line, like in tobacco, but also when taken to the World Trade Organization, then it is extensive to the rest of the territories. And I think that, yes, indeed, it affects the brands, the function of the brand, and that is an affectation to intellectual property and a little bit to what includes the adoption of the TRIPS agreement in the World Trade Organization. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you all for assisting to this, for attending to this panel. Thank you.